Good evening and welcome to the planning meeting. It's now 6 o'clock and I'd like to start the meeting. Excuse that frog in the throat. My name is Mike Fletcher and I will be chairing this meeting tonight. I'd like to remind everybody present that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded for publication on the Council's website. There are no planned fire alarms this evening. In the case of an emergency, please evacuate the building using the nearest available exit. I guess we're talking about these two. And congregate at the assembly point just outside the college opposite us. So item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. Carly, do we have any apologies? No, great. Thank you very much. Item 2, minutes. I move that the minutes for the Planning Committee meeting held on 12th of August 2025 be approved as a correct record. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? No? Great. Thank you very much. So on to item 3, items of urgent business. I've not agreed to any items of urgent business for tonight. Item 4, declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest to make? Councillor Lydiard, then Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chair. Just wanted to declare that I'm a board member on Impulse Leisure, and that will mean I will be excluded for items 8 and 9.
Thanks, Steve. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a declaration regarding the planning application for 240118 Thurrock Football Club. My brother has sponsored Grays Athletic within the last 6 months. While I do not consider this affects my decision making and I remain fair and open to all arguments, I recognise the importance of ensuring that planning decisions are not only impartial but are also seen to be impartial. Therefore, I will be withdrawing myself from this item to avoid any perception of bias or predetermination.
Thanks, Aaron. Just quickly checking, is Councillor Green required to do that, or is it? Or we're happy to do that?
It's Councillor Green's choice, but as I understand, Councillor Green will step away from that item. So he's let us know in advance of the meeting. So on the last item, Councillor Green will have to leave the meeting.
Thanks again, Aaron. Councillor Panjala.
Thank you, Chair. I have submitted my objection regarding the planning application reference number 2400332 Arterial Hub Sports. So I want to step away from the voting from this one. Yes, item 9. Thank you.
Is there anybody left who is going to be able to talk about item 9? Thanks. Thanks, Shrikant. Okay, thank you for that. So, just give me a second, folks.
So, Councillor, if you're stepping away from item 9, do you not need to step away from item 8 as they're interrelated?
I don't want to step away from the item number 8. I want to discuss about that one.
Okay, just to clarify then, Councillor, so you wish to step away from item 9, is that because you're prejudiced or have you predetermined that application? So can you just clarify why it is you need to step away from item 9?
Item 9, I have an objection about that. In the past also I have submitted my objections. Now also I have submitted my statement for that reason.
Okay, on that basis then, would you surely not be in the same position for item 8, given the relationship between the two applications?
Yes.
Anybody else? No, that's good. Thank you. Item 6. Planning appeals. I'd like to ask Jonathan Keane to present, if you will, John.
Thank you, Chair. No specific comments this evening, but any questions? Happy to take any questions.
Anybody got any questions for John? You'll have read the overview. No? John, we're up to, so it's 2 this month, which is, by our standards, quite high. But I note that one of them, if I'm reading it rightly, is basically because the rules changed between the original decision and the redetermination. Would that be correct?
Yes, so item 4.3, Annabelle Avenue, the site is within the green belt, and at the time of making the decision, the MPPF hadn't been updated. If we'd made the decision following the updated MPPF, we'd have likely recommended approval for that one. Yeah.
Thank you. Right, so we move on to tonight's applications. So item 7 on the agenda, item 25/0078 out, which is land at 22 and to the rear of... Oh, interestingly, I don't have them on it. I'm sorry, folks, we have a slight discrepancy between what I've got on here and what's on there. So I just want to check before we go ahead. Has anybody had any correspondence, any calls, any meetings that you wish to declare? Roy.
Chair, we had a site visit, so I suppose realistically we should put that down to Fairview. We all had a site visit, or 4 of us did, and the agent was there. So that's just a declare. Okay?
Thank you, Councillor. I think generally we take site visits as just us doing the job, so I think you're okay on that one. Okay, so I will now. Oh, sorry, Councillor Maney. Sorry, Jackie, I didn't see your hand up. I think your shirt was drowning it out.
Now. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to say that we did, I think we all, or many of us, had some correspondence with Julie Goss. Did we not? So, yeah, I just wanted to clear that, please.
Do you guys want to know what that correspondence was about? I'm not sure if you've seen anything.
Chair, I'm not aware of the correspondence.
Sorry, Ash. It was. I did declare it last planning meeting about the videos that she sent of the badgers and that correspondence.
That's fine. I know that was. I passed that on to John, and I think that's been reviewed, so it'll be covered as part of the update, I think. Right. So, item 7. The land at 22 and to the rear of 18 to 28 Fairview Avenue. It's on pages 21 to 106 of your papers. So to start with, John, can I ask you to present the updated report?
Thank you, Chair. So on the screen, just a quick refresh for members for the site. So it's the rear gardens, the properties on the screen shown in red above. It's an outline application with all matters reserved apart from layout and access. That's the proposal in front of you. So you've got...
Sorry, John, I think one or two of the audience
Okay.
can't quite hear, so...
So we have a terrace of 3 properties to the northern part of the site, semi-detached property in the middle, detached property below that, and a pair of semis to the bottom of the site. Then we've got garage courts and parking spaces to the north of the access, a garage and parking courts to the south. That's an indicative plan of what the properties and the parking courts and garages could look like. And that's a picture of the proposed access, which would be widened for the development. Those are some photos from Fairview Avenue and across the rear gardens of the properties. That's a summary of the application. So the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report. There's been one additional condition added on the list of conditions since the previous discussion, and that is condition 23, which requires an updated bat and badger survey to be submitted, and that will address some of the concerns that members had in relation to potential for bats and badgers in the area. But as I said, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions.
Thanks, John. Now, obviously, we will give you the opportunity to question John on that update. But first of all, we have a couple of statements. First of those, we have a statement of objection from the ward councillor, Neil Spate. Neil, would you like to come up and take us through your statement, please? I think it's generally the one on the end. Hopefully the microphone is working. Neil, you'll have 3 minutes. Start in your own time. You'll have 3 minutes, and at the end of it, the committee will have the opportunity to ask you any factual questions which they wish. So, in your own time.
Okay, firstly, I would like to express my thanks to Councillor Fletcher for facilitating the opportunity for me to speak on behalf of residents in the Stamford West Ward who have asked me to support their objections to this development, a task I'm happy to do as I also feel it is inappropriate. Members will have previously seen 2 detailed written submissions from myself giving material planning reasons why I believe, which I believe support rejecting this outline application. I have concentrated in those emails on material planning reasons that can be evidenced and which relate to access and layout, the prime considerations before this committee this evening. Those objections give details of evidenced concerns about traffic flow, including access and egress danger, potential parking problems both within the site, curtilage and on Fairview Avenue, proximity of new buildings to existing homes and the subsequent breach of privacy. In particular, I have pointed out the disingenuous maps produced by the applicant to members which purport to show equal proximity between proposed buildings on the site and neighbouring existing buildings, showing the same distance as in neighbouring streets there. These maps are one-dimensional and do not reflect the height difference that apply on the proposed site. Effectively, the applicant is comparing apples with pears. Please do not be misled. If you attended the site visit or have seen the video clip I have produced, the height difference between the planned and the site and the rear gardens in Ride Drive will be clear to you. The applicant has also suggested trees will be left in place between the 2 sites. Many of those trees have already been removed. There are other material planning flaws that I have pointed out, but I do not have time to detail them all here, but they are in my previous submissions. With regard to non-immediately material issues, including wildlife on the site, councillors have already expressed deep concerns and I have seen nothing from the applicants to alleviate them. This site will contribute nothing to the area through section 106, yet with 8 homes, including 3 three-bedded ones, it is inevitably going to add to already overstretched local resources. Again, not particularly relevant, materially relevant at this point, ownership of parts of the site is contested, and HM Land Registry have given notice to the applicant that they have concerns about who actually owns the land. In short, it is my opinion this application is neither valid nor wanted locally, and there are legitimate reasons why I believe that would stand the test on appeal. Remember, if you grant this outline permission, the key to the door isn't just inserted in the door is opened, and who knows what may follow given the principle of development is established. Infill developments such as this are insidious blots on our local landscapes. They eat up infrastructure and resource and give little back. I understand officers feel the need to support wherever possible applications that increase our housing supply, but only applications that are sustainable, bring value to communities and meet all reasonable challenges should be approved. This application, in my opinion, and there are many residents, should be rejected. As someone with more than 20 years of observing this committee and my awareness of expectations when officer recommendations are rejected, I have drafted in advance for all members to see a detailed recommendation that I believe would stand the test of an appeal. Members are often asked with no notice at the drop of a hat to come up with appropriate words under ridiculous pressure. By submitting the draft in advance, which any members here can propose and which the clerk has a copy of for reference, I hope I am being helpful to councillors who are, of course, free to propose it, amend it or reject it.
Thanks, Neil. Before we let you go, councillors, any questions of a factual nature that you'd like to ask Neil? Okay, thank you. I assume you're all therefore happy with what you've heard, happy you understand it. Councillor Cherry.
Neil, you've obviously had the opportunity to speak to several of the complainants there. Is there any support for any other type of development at that location which might satisfy? I have mentioned before bungalows, which would have less impact, a visual impact, and possibly lead to less vehicle movements.
Sorry to
been-
cut in on you, councillor. We'll leave it at the question, and you can always bring up the statement during the debate. So, Neil, question is, have you...
No, not specifically. Obviously, there are two residents who've got a vested interest in the property who've been supportive. Everyone else that I've spoken to in the area has been against it, and generally they're against it per se. They're not looking at an alternative. And if on that site, it is very, very small, and there are all the issues that we've gone through several times. So no, nobody is... I think most people would just prefer to see it left as it is.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Neil, for that. It was very helpful. I'll remove my sweet. Have you, in the report, it says that the bat colony, they felt that it was from a neighbouring property. Can I ask you what your views is on that, please?
They're sort of nondescript because I very much believe in having things that are evidence-based, and I have only been told through hearsay that bats are on the site. I haven't seen the ecology report that supports that. And at the end of the day, my understanding of an outline application, it primarily concerned with design and access and layout, and I don't think it's even a prerequisite that the wildlife reports need to be submitted at this stage. They would be submitted, I believe, if it went to a all matters hearing. But I personally have not, but I've spoken to residents who I absolutely trust, and they tell me there are bats on the site.
Thanks, Jackie. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Neil, the lady that lives, is it Mrs. Trott, is it? Yeah. Now, she was, they spoke to her about putting a barrier up against the wall. Can you explain what happened and what was said to her, please?
Yeah, I can. Again, in fairness to the legal officer, this is testimony given to me by Mrs. Trott, but I have no doubt that it's true. And I've also, you know, the lady is a very genuine person, so I've no doubt. She was approached because she's very concerned by the proximity of vehicles to the wall, which is very adjacent also to her front door. It's a side door, the main entrance to the building. You open the door and you're virtually on where the access road would be. And she has a brick wall with a pillar on the end of it, which again is on her property. It's within her curtilage, and it is quite substantial. She has raised the matter of the danger of that through vehicles, particularly during construction. And if you've been to, for example, we know if this goes through and they do bring construction traffic into that site, it's going to be huge. I mean, it's got to be ground zero. You're talking diggers, dumpers, pushers, shovers, everything. So she expressed those concerns, and the representative of the agent said, don't worry about it. What we'll do is we're prepared to put a steel barrier up along the external part of your wall, which will protect your wall in case anything was to hit it. And clearly, if we did hit anything, then we would take remedial advantage. Mrs. Trott pointed out, well, what happens when the construction's done? Oh, we'll take the wall away. Now, you couldn't ask for a clearer admission from the applicant, and they may well be able to clarify that further themselves, but you know, they're actually saying, we recognise that this road is not going to be wide enough. There is a danger of collision with this property. Therefore, we're going to put in a steel barrier to stop it happening. I mean, you couldn't ask for anything. If that, you know, and I do not doubt the word of Mrs. Trott that is what happened, and that is what was said to her. But the applicant, I'm sure, will have the opportunity to say whether that's true or not.
Councillor, I hate to cut in, but appreciate that you know, we're asking for questions and answers of a factual nature. So thank you for explaining what you heard. I would ask that councillors make their own conclusions on what that necessarily means. Although you can also ask the applicant who's up next. Has anybody else got a question for Neil? No? Thanks very much, Neil. Appreciate it. I've lost my sheet. We now have a statement of support from the applicant. And I've managed to mislay my sheet. So, Madhuri Nair, are you here? Thank you. And my apologies if I've massacred your name. So as with Neil, just to explain, you'll have 3 minutes. We normally have a clock up here, but it doesn't work at the minute. So you'll have 3 minutes, and then we'll ask the councillors if they've got any questions of a factual nature in your own time.
Good evening, Chair and members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again as the planning agent for this application. The proposal before you today is acceptable in all respects and recommended for approval. At the July committee, members raised concerns in relation to highway safety, ecological impacts and residential amenity. They have since been provided with the opportunity to visit the site. Thurrock can only demonstrate 1.02 years of housing land supply against the requirement of 5, a shortfall which means that the council must engage a presumption in favour of sustainable development. The proposal makes effective use of land, contributing positively to housing supply in a residential area, a preferential approach to giving up higher quality land within the Greenbelt and wider countryside. The proposal seeks to improve the existing access through the relocation of a telegraph pole, removal of a hedgerow, number 22's conservatory and fence, whilst protecting the existing wall. Parking has been provided in excess of the requirement, also accounting for numbers 20 and 24, the latter of which has no existing provision. The Council's Highways Officer is satisfied that the proposal is acceptable. The Council have also secured funding for highway improvements in the area, including the introduction of speed cushions along Fairview Avenue. Following the August committee, footage has circulated of badgers and bats allegedly observed in gardens near the site. The officer's report states that the footage cannot be deemed conclusive evidence in the absence of distinguishable features. The Council's ecology advisor has been reconsulted on the footage and confirms that badgers and bats are unlikely to be living on site due to the absence of buildings, badger sets, or suitable trees. Any observed are likely to be from nearby areas but outside the site itself. For both species, further conditions have been recommended. In regard to privacy, nearby examples of separation distances have been submitted and confirmed that those proposed are typical of the area and exceed the adopted standards. Existing vegetation on the site's eastern boundary with the Ride Drive properties will be retained and enhanced where possible to further screen the development and protect residential amenity. In closing, none of the reasons for refusal discussed at the last committee are considered to be defensible at appeal. I therefore commend the proposal to you and kindly request that you grant planning permission this evening in accordance with the officer recommendation. I welcome any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So, councillors, any questions, factual questions for Ms. Nair? No? Okay, thank you very much. And we will now move on to questions to John. Thank you, Midori. So, go back to the updated report. There is obviously a lot more detail in the papers than John went through. So, any questions for John on that? Who'd like to start? Roy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jonathan, for your pieces of paper about this. Number 22. The only way that this can be accessed is if this conservatory and fence is knocked down. What is the relationship between number 22 and the developer for this to happen?
I don't know the exact relationship between them and the developer. They are a landowner in the area. The application has been, the red line has been consulted on correctly, so everybody whose land may be affected has been notified. So if they have an agreement with the developer to sell that land or to demolish that conservatory, that's between them and that's outside the planning process. So all notifications being carried out correctly. So that's outside of the planning process how that happens.
Follow up from Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Who actually owns the access road, if you like, the pathway?
I can look those details up. I don't have them to hand. They're on the file.
So is that pathway shared? You know, so Mrs. Trott, she owns part of it, does she?
I would need to look those details up. I don't have them immediately to hand. I can look those up if you'd like me to.
Thanks, Roy. Any other questions from any of you? Oh, yeah. So Steve and then Kathy.
Thanks, Chair. But I think Jonathan's looking something up. Ask him a question while he's trying to find something
Do you want us to give you a sec, Jonathan?
Okay. Yeah.
I think he's ready, Steve.
Yes.
Sorry. Thanks, Chair. One of the things I was reading through today talks about, and it's on page 73, where it talks about the removal of permitted development rights. Am I right in assuming that means on the new properties, or does it apply to the existing properties that are effectively affected?
Yeah, so the permitted development rights removal would only apply to the properties in the red line, so it's only the new properties, yeah.
I just wanted to check. Thanks, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Kathy?
Thank you. I understand there's some disputed land ownership for part of the site. What area does that affect within the site?
In terms of the land ownership, that has been an issue that's been raised in the local press. But in terms of land ownership, all the certificates that have been submitted have been correctly identified. So the land ownership issue is not something you as committee members can consider. You can only consider the material planning considerations. So if it turns out that somebody owns land and doesn't want to sell it, then the development couldn't go ahead, but you can't consider that. That's not within your gift.
So effectively, John, the planning application could be correct and could be acceptable irrespective of who actually owns the land.
Yeah, they may, if somebody decides they don't want to sell it, that would potentially scupper the permission, but you can't make a decision on the basis of what could happen with land ownership. You can only consider it what's on the basis of the plans in front of you.
Thanks. Anybody else with any questions? Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Jonathan, could you explain what biodiversity net gain means for this particular development?
So yeah, so biodiversity net gain is something that was introduced by the government in 2024, and it means that for all new developments of a certain size, there should be an uplift in ecology and biodiversity on the sites, on all sites, of a minimum of 10%. So this can be achieved in a number of ways, either through on-site provision of improved ecology, so further landscaping, that type of issue, or a developer could buy off-site credits potentially to secure benefits off-site. In terms of this application, condition 27 requires the applicant to submit a biodiversity net gain plan, which shows how they will achieve that biodiversity upgrade. And on the basis of the response from the ecology officer, he is satisfied that could be achieved fairly easily.
So basically, what we lose here, we will gain somewhere else, hopefully.
All sort of landscaping or landscaping, trees, vegetation has different values. So the values of the site at present may be fairly low because of the type of coverage. Via the biodiversity net gain plan, the developer would submit a scheme which ensured that there was a higher level of biodiversity on site. So just because the site may be covered in vegetation at this point doesn't necessarily mean it's good quality vegetation with a wide diversity of ecology. And you could have a scheme where better value vegetation is provided on a smaller area, which would achieve that uplift.
Thanks, Steve. Any more questions? Okay, I've got a couple Jonathan, based on what we heard previously. The point was raised that some of the trees which the applicant has talked about preserving have in fact already been removed. Do you have any comment on that? Because obviously when I heard that, that was of some concern. I just wanted to give you the right to reply on that.
So it's correct to say that some of the trees... Colleague, can we put the presentation back in? It's correct to say that some of the trees to the rear of the site, so in the approximate location I'm showing with the mouse now, have been removed. But if members were looking to grant permission, a condition could be applied to put some new trees or enhance the boundary planting along that area. So that needn't be a concern if that was a concern for members.
Do you mind if I ask why they were removed? Was it as part of action by the applicant, or do we know?
I believe residents, this is what I've been led to believe, that the residents to the rear wanted those trees removed for some reason, but I don't know any more than that. It's anecdotal.
Thank you. And second question, as Neil pointed out, inevitably the map is a two-dimensional document. You get an idea of spatial relation, but not an idea of relative height. Obviously, you are familiar with the site. How big an impact do you think it is likely to have, the fact that some of these buildings at least there'll be a particularly marked height difference between the new builds and the buildings surrounding them? What impact, and how can we actually mitigate that impact?
So I think in terms of the height, the land does drop from Fairview Avenue to the south, and the land changes across the site and to the rear. So if the properties were all level, you'd have a more traditional sort of back-to-back or front-to-front situation where the windows would be directly facing each other. In this instance, because of the lie of the land, you get levels that are potentially higher, but that wouldn't necessarily increase views because there's the ability to plant at the rear of the site, and as detailed elsewhere in the report, the only matters for consideration are layout and access. So the final layout of the final design of the property, the fenestration pattern wouldn't be agreed via this application. So there would be the scope through the reserved matters application to ensure that there isn't any harmful overlooking. But the view of officers is that given the location, given the distances, it's not something that's an unusual layout in any respect.
So two things, if I understand it. One, that horizontally the gaps, the distances are in keeping with the buildings around. I know that's been said. But secondly, with regard to the potential overlook from buildings being on a different height, you're saying that these could be addressed through conditions rather than necessarily being addressed by turning down the application. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, potentially, if that was a concern of members, the applicants here tonight would have heard the discussions, and in any future application could look at ways to design the windows so that they didn't directly look to the rear of the site if that was a concern that members had. So there are options on how to sort of provide different style windows to standard windows you'd see on properties.
Thanks, John. Right, so we've had the questions. There's always one. Councillor Green.
Always one. There's always one, Aaron. Could you just confirm what the width of the new road would be, please?
So I anticipated somebody might ask this. So we've got the maximum is 6.32 metres at the access with Fairview Avenue. The Essex Design Guide recommends a minimum road width of 4.8 metres, so it's slightly above the recommended minimum.
Is there a follow-up, Councillor? Right, thank you. Okay, so what I'd like to do is to move on to the debate. And this is the point really where I'm interested to know your thoughts, for, against, etc. So who would like to kick the debate off? Oh, we are very bashful tonight. Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Chair. I've visited the site. I didn't go on the site visit, but I went along with Councillor Sisterson separately. And I do have real grave concerns about this development. I think these residents are really going to be in for it, to be honest. I think the disruption that these poor people are going to be up against, with the particularly with the bin lorries, when they've said that they can drive forwards, I think I read in the report, they can drive forwards, enabling them to turn so that they can drive straight out. I mean, that involves the beeping lorries, doesn't it? That involves the noise that comes with that, on top of everything else that's going to be happening. And the breach of privacy concerns me greatly. And I know what you said, John, about they can move the windows or they can plant the trees. With established trees, because I assume they'd buy established trees, I don't know if you know the Ocado site in Averley. I mean, them residents were promised trees and they got them at a vast expense. But the privacy relies on the trees being watered, and nobody watered them trees, and then residents are looking at a building and dead trees. That's my concern. I mean, you can put a stipulation in about trees, but you can't put a stipulation in that people are going to actually water them. And I've just got grave concerns. I've got concerns about the bats. I don't believe that they've come from a neighbouring property. I simply don't. Diggers on site, and like Neil said, pushing and shoving and banging and grinding. It just doesn't seem an appropriate site to me to be doing this.
Thanks, Jackie. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I'm so concerned, Mrs. Yvonne Trott. There she is. She's going to have all these vehicles right close to her home. Maybe the neighbour at 22 is okay with taking his lean-to down and having vehicles come past his home. But, you know, this lady, she even wants to retain the hedge that she's got down there, but I can't see that. That's not going to happen, is it? They're going to take that down. They need to take that down to keep the width. And it's just not fair. This lady's lived there for many years. She's very content. She's got a nice form of living, and there she's going to have vehicles passing very close to her home. This is not due consideration to a resident, in my mind. And the complete thing, I'm glad I paid another site visit and actually walked down the pathway to I couldn't believe, you know, I said to Jonathan, where are we? Thank you very much, Jonathan. And he said, there we are, we're at the bottom. And within a very short space of time, we was there. And I looked round and I thought, what? This is amazing. I like to see the architect, because to build 8 houses on such a small, a small plot is very creative. It really is. And I'm just looking round there. Then I'm looking over at the homes that's on Ride Drive. So it's obvious that the way this banks down, privacy is going to be, there's going to be no privacy for them. And we might leave a few trees up, or if they don't get damaged in construction, shall we say. But they're not going to have privacy. It's as simple as that. So to my mind, it's just not feasible. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Councillor Sisterson.
Yeah, I've got the concerns I had before. I've still got largely about the ecology. Also, I'd question the agent says that these infill sites are preferable to building on the green belt. Now, we all know that we've got some huge developments coming up in all parts of Thurrock. Literally thousands of houses. This is 8 houses. I don't believe that somewhere there are going to be 8 fewer houses in one of these massive developments. So I don't actually think that that's fair to say that it's preferable to the large developments, because we will have both. So let's save the bit of ecology we have got there, would be my argument.
Thanks, Cathy. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Cherry.
I'll bore everybody to death again with the word bungalows. It's the houses in Ryde Drive are going to be overlooked. And if at all the developer could consider other people's considerations in negating that one aspect of the complaints by building lower rise properties, far more sympathetically and with a view to being less impactful to people living there and whilst it's being constructed. To build bungalows, it would help then free up houses in the area to be sold that families can move into, and people who are desperate to move into low-level accommodation could find somewhere locally. That, bungalows aren't being built across the borough because they're not as profitable. But I do think there's a need for us to consider our elderly people and disabled people that could use something like a low-level building built very sympathetically. And it may or may not be something that the residents might accept. I don't know. Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. Any further? Councillor Panjala?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. I have been visited last time along with the Kathy sisters and Steve Lydiard and along with the officers. And I had a chat with the neighbor. She deeply expressed her objection because of their main entrance is locating towards the exactly quite opposite to where the lane is going inside. So that's the reason I am having a concerns about their privacy. So we need to think about that one. Thank you.
Thanks, Srikanth. Any more for any more? Councillor Manny.
Last one, thanks, Chair. It's reached my ears that there's a fox's den that's been there for a number of years outside or to the rear of number 16. Apparently it's been there for over a decade. What would happen to that?
Thank you for the question. We do have the conditions about, let me have a look, an ecological management plan on page 21. That does refer to bats and badgers, but if members were concerned, we could add foxes to the list as well, if that's what members wanted us to do.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Jackie. Any more for any more, or shall we? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. So I think both sides have really sort of done well to put their arguments across on this one. In terms of these sites, obviously we have had a chronic underbuilding in this country over the last 30 years, and I think developers, they do find it difficult to build on the green belt, so unfortunately they do start looking at sites like this. I call them shoehorn sites because you're effectively shoehorning as many homes into people's back gardens as you can.
Sorry, Tom, would you mind speaking up a bit?
Sorry.
No way.
So developers will naturally look at these sites because they have the ability to sometimes get around the MPPF to get approval. I don't particularly like the site, but we have refused it. It has gone away. It has come back. If we do refuse it, it's going to go to appeal. Obviously, they've got a good chance on appeal. So this is one of those schemes where I don't particularly like it, but I do think that, ultimately, on the basis that they could win on appeal, I'll vote in favour of it. But as I said, I don't particularly like it. The ownership of the site, I know it's not a material consideration, but it's still something that's in our minds because these are were people's back gardens. So either someone sold that land, in which case, what did you expect was going to happen? Or they haven't, and it's still under ownership. But it's not relevant, it's not material, but it's still sort of, I can't work out what's gone on there. But I'll support it, and who knows what the future holds with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor Lydiard.
Thanks, Chair. I think anybody going down to this site, it sort of weighs heavy on your heart to see the end of that site. It is rather beautiful. On the other side, of course, it's a urban location, It's very near the station, so you would say, you know, very sustainable. This is outline planning permission only, of course, and with all matters reserved. If we turn this down, and we've only got 1 year's supply of development land, it probably means we've got to use up more of our greenbelt space, which we clearly don't want to do. I was quite impressed with the number of trees at the bottom of the site. So, you know, I'm fairly tall. I was trying to look over and I couldn't really see through the trees. So I think the overlooking aspect of it is not valid as far as I'm concerned. And I guess I will be voting with the officer purely and simply because it is urban, it is near the station, and if we don't develop in our urban areas, we've got to develop more in our green belt. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Steve, for that. I'd like to sum up what I've heard, and then I'd like to go to Ash. So I think a lot of what we've talked about revolves around a number of aspects. Clearly, the resident at number 22, we've got a lot of very valid concerns about the process of getting this thing built and about the road next to her house, which I think has to be taken into account. Whether that or some of these other objections can be dealt with via conditions, I don't know. I'd raise that question. I'm not sure that there would be any way of building here, whether it's bungalows, whether it's two-story houses, without that disruption, because you are in effect driving a gap through between two existing houses to build. So whatever gets built back here, that disruption would happen. There's clearly some concerns around privacy, and I think this question of height and overlooking needs to be addressed. Again, I raise the question: is that necessarily a reason to reject it, or is it a reason to put robust conditions on? The wildlife, we seem to have gone backwards and forwards on this one, and there seems to be, unfortunately, a bit of disagreement as to exactly what's on there. What seems to be quite clear from the videos that we have seen is that wildlife does visit the area. Whether they're necessarily overnighting there it's really, that's the only area of debate. You know, the fact is they do visit the area. It seems to be popular with a number of different species, and I wouldn't personally argue with the badger. One point I would make, and it's been mentioned a couple of times, it's this all built on the greenbelt. I really don't think we can look at that as a reason to pass this application. We're not talking about this versus any theoretical or actual greenbelt development. We have to look at this on its own merits. So, so just, you know, in terms of, you will obviously make your own decisions based on your own thoughts. What I would say is two things. One, do think about what can be achieved through conditions. And two, do bear in mind that if we refuse, this goes to appeal and it goes through on appeal, we will have lost the opportunity to set any conditions. Now, before we go to the vote, Ash, you wanted to say a couple of things?
Yep, thank you, Chair. So just in terms of some of the concerns raised by members, to my mind, they are outlined in the committee report, the case officer report that's in front of you. So we've made reference to sort of privacy, which I think effectively we're conflating with amenity impact, which we discussed at the previous meeting. So just draw members to 7.4 and particularly 7.4.9, where we've done a response and council have done a response to that. So when members are focusing their minds on the recommendation and any decision they make, please do give that appropriate weight. With respect to ecology, that's addressed at 7.5, and then equally important 7.5.14, where we've got the council view in terms of the strength of that in terms of the ecology, but also cross-referencing the condition. Oh, okay, thank you. 7.5.9. And then with respect to construction, we do have the condition, which is a fairly standard condition, which is condition 18. So members may wish to review that condition, and if there's anything they wish officers to add to that condition to satisfy themselves, then we can certainly consider that. So if you do, then please let us know. And then finally, just in terms of the need for housing and the presumption in favour of sustainable development, that's critically important. And Councillor Lydiard had effectively cross-referenced that, but that's at 7.6.2 of the report. So I'll just leave members to cross-reference those sections. I'm sure they've read them in advance. And then if my legal counsel wishes to add anything.
Just a few points from national policy. So councillors will be aware the test you need to apply in this case is whether the harms that you've identified significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of this scheme. As is explained in the report, it's a very high test. And for the avoidance of doubt, that means there can be harms from this scheme, really quite substantial harms, and still the test is that in 11D Roman 2, which is that the harms must significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And then just to build on what Ash referred to there, policy is quite clear that if something can be made appropriate by planning conditions, then it is unreasonable not to use planning conditions to make a planning permission viable. And there's been some reference to transport concerns. Again, the test in national policy is a high one. You're looking for something that's been identified as an unacceptable highway impact or a cumulative impact which is severe. So again, policy envisages harms. And that's the situation that we're in. And certainly a situation for this council where you have 1.02 years of housing land supply, whereas the national requirement is 5 years. So I hope that's of assistance. Again, I would just stress the test in this case is a high one.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, Councillor Maney.
Thanks, Chair. This is one for Ash. He'll clear this up as he always does. But a fear of a cost associated with appeal isn't a material planning consideration. So why do we have to consider that?
So it's within committee's gift to make the decision, so it's ultimately up to committee, and I don't think there's much more officers can really say on this item. So what committee do need to do is just consider whether we're being reasonable or unreasonable. So we certainly shouldn't be threatening costs, but we do need to say if we think something is unreasonable, and that's what we tried to do in the report. Obviously, it's now up to committee to come to their own conclusion, and committee may not agree with our view on that.
Thanks, Ash. I'm just looking at 7.5.9 here, and it's a point, I guess, that Steve, yeah, I'll quit waffling, let you in, and then what I say will make far more sense after you've talked.
Thanks, Chair. I'm sure you're right. I just wanted to clarify something, and Ash, I'm sure, can do this for us, or probably Jonathan could. But one of the things that I think you said when you were summing up is if it goes to appeal and it's dismissed, sorry, not dismissed, if it's approved, it's still only outline. So that doesn't stop conditions being put on after the event, which I think you were suggesting that all of a sudden then you can't put any conditions on it. I'm not sure that, well, in fact, I'm pretty sure that's not true, unless Ashley's going to tell me otherwise.
No, that's right. So if members determine to refuse, goes to appeal, we'll have the ability to insert conditions, and we can obviously cover that at the appropriate point.
Thanks, Steve. I think actually that was my bum steer, because I did definitely say when it goes, I was forgetting for a moment that this is outline. So yes, you're absolutely right. So thanks for pointing that out. Right, so I think we need to go to the vote. The proposal on which we are voting is as follows: that the Chief Planning Officer be authorised to grant permission for the development, subject to those items set out in section 16 of this report, specifically conditions. So do I have a proposer for that, Councillor Lydia? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kelly. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Okay. So that recommendation has failed. So what we now need to do is to agree a recommendation that we can vote on, that we can actually pass. Roy, you wanted to say something?
Thank you, Chair. I have got a counter recommendation. It's quite a long one because it's covering a lot of points.
Who gave you that?
Well, I'm going to say we part author to this book, shall I say, but it's trying to cover all angles. So you can either take a copy of this and I'll read one out. It's entirely
Give me a
up to
second,
you.
because I'll probably get you to read it, Roy, but I just wanted...
You've got all night.
When I get conversation to be right, it usually means something, so I'll just quickly check with them.
So I was just clarifying, Councillor. So had you brought these reasons with you ahead of the meeting?
Have I brought them with me? I've jotted some notes, yes.
So you hadn't brought them to the meeting prepared?
I jotted some notes and I put them down, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a question on predetermination, really, Chair. I mean, this is a matter for you.
No, it's not predetermination. It was already, I've done a site visit. So realistically, you do a site visit and then you gauge your opinion on what you've seen. So through that, then you jot down notes and you put things together. So, you know, predetermination could be many things, couldn't it? If you don't like a thing, you've got a predetermination. You've gone to see it, and that's probably reinforced your opinion. So I don't really accept that, because I already know this place, this site, but I went to the site visit just to basically reinforce my opinions. So this was already down on my opinions. Thank you.
Thanks, Roy. We're just bringing our legal friend in on this one.
Thanks. Apologies. So the test, it is correct to say that a councillor can have a legitimate predisposition to a matter that is going to come before the committee. What cannot be the case is that a committee member has already decided the matter before they've heard all of the debate, which would include the matters that have been before the committee today. As Ash said, it is ultimately, councillor, a matter for you. The test, when you're considering whether you should or should not vote, is whether you are or might appear to be biased or predetermined. And if you consider you are, then you must not vote. And if you consider you aren't, then you may vote. But that's the test. It's been the test for decades. So I just wanted to bring that to the committee's attention.
So you're saying that, so basically it's for Councillor Jones to decide in your own heart whether you were, during this debate, whether you were in a position to be persuaded or not.
I was, Chair. Thank you.
We happy with that, gentlemen?
Yeah, as long as it's up to the councillor.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. So, Councillor, you've got an alternative. Can I plead that we get a short version? Just the key points, because I mean, at the end of the day, we've got to vote on it, so we have actually got to understand it.
Thank you, Chair. I shall pass one of these, a copy out to you. But basically, this committee rejects outline application 25/00078/OUT, land at 22 and to the rear of 18 to 28 Fairview Avenue, Stamford, Lee Hope, on the grounds that it does not meet the required or expected standard of access and layout. The entry is too narrow to be sure to be safe access for egress and access for both small vehicles and HGVs, including waste collection, and also is too close to existing residential property access, so this could be deemed unsafe and dangerous. The increased traffic, both during construction and on completion, will be close to the main entrance to the adjoining properties, so much that the applicants have said they will install temporary steel girders to protect the neighbours' existing brickwork. The parking provision on the site is insufficient to meet expected demand and will mean overspill to adjacent areas which do not have the capacity to cope. The parking is reliant on considerate and careful parking by the residents, so this could actually upset the waste collection when they turn up. If the parking is not in the place, as it says on the map, then the lorry's not going to be able to turn round. Also, the development layout is intrusive to the adjacent properties on Fairview and Ryde Drive. This is not very good for the people at Ryde Drive. So yeah.
That's actually, you read it quicker than it writes.
Yeah, I'm pretty good, Chair. Thank you.
If I might make a suggestion, I think as regards the access not meeting the required standards, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, the office has demonstrated that they do meet the required standards. Whether we feel they're wide enough is another story.
Chair,
yeah, do come back.
That all depends on if they're going to take that lady's hedge down. So, you know, you can take it one way or the other. Thank you.
Okay, so the proposal on the table then is to reject on the grounds of, hopefully I've got this right, the access not meeting the required standards, the access being too close to existing property access, parking provision being insufficient for the properties on the site, and the properties being intrusive or potentially intrusive to adjacent properties. Is that
especially
correct?
Ryde Drive.
Okay, so if that is the alternative, before we go to a vote on that, anybody wish to suggest any improvements on that, or do you want to go straight to voting yes or no on that amended proposal? You can if you turn your thingy on.
Thank you, Chair. I can't vote for this recommendation, mainly because while I respect Councillor Jones and I respect that him as a councillor, I don't like the way the recommendation's been brought forward. And while I believe he isn't predetermined, the look of it does look of it, so I can't vote for this recommendation on them grounds.
Thank you, Aaron. Councillor Lydiard? Bearing in mind that we will be asking you to vote, so you can either agree or disagree with it.
As you know, and you were with me when the Planning Advisory Service gave us some training and some advice. But what they said was over the last 5 years, Thurrock Council had turned over too many of the officers' recommendations for no good reason and lost on appeal. And I think all of our members on planning should be aware of that, and maybe they should have the same training that we got as well.
Okay, I think we're in danger of going back into debate. So what I would like to do is to just move things forward, is take a vote on the proposal to reject, and see if we get a majority on that, and we can then take it from there. So The proposal is as I previously read it. Have I got to read it again? Or is it sticking in our memories enough that I can take it as read? You remember what I said 5 minutes ago? Right. So the proposal is to reject based on those 4 heads. Do I have a proposer? Thank you, Roy. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Jackie. All those in favour of the proposal to reject the application, to refuse permission? If you can get your hands up clearly so that Carly can see them. I can see you all, but she's having to look from behind. Okay. All those against? And any abstentions? Right, so the proposal is carried. The application, permission for the application is refused. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to suggest if you wish to take a natural break, you've earned one.
Did we move the item around? Did we mention
it's moved in here.
Oh, is
I
it?
haven't mentioned it, so I'll mention it.
It's not just that we could be looking at a judicial review now. Because he has brought a
He's brought a typed sheet, yeah.
type sheet, which is councillor status supplied at the start of the meeting. That's predetermination. So it's not just cost of work, we're looking at predetermination, judicial review. But I've asked him a question. Ultimately, if he's satisfied he's not, it's for him to answer. If we did get a JR, he'll have to answer that.
Yeah.
We've done everything we can.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, committee is within the committee's gift, and council manager's right. You know, we can't threaten costs. We can just give them information.
No.
So that we've done it to death, really. Let's just go to appeal, and obviously
Yeah.
we'll try to defend the appeal.
My concern, and before Steve mentioned it, I did want to read out that point about national policy, if it can be dealt with through conditions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think pretty well everything.
Call me
that
back
we
in,
talk
won't
about-
you? When
Yeah.
I'll be outside.
No worries. Pretty well everything that people are concerned about either can be dealt with by conditions or seem to come down to one particular person not wanting building going on next to a house.
And the agents are quite aggressive, so they will appeal. As
Yeah.
long as they feel they.
I think in their position I would as well.
But it is what it is.
Yeah, I'd take it personally, Erin, I really would. Right, so just before we move on to the next one, I'd like to mention that we've moved around numbers 8 and 9, and we're taking the former Fireman's Social Club first, and the Bellis football pitches second, because in effect the Bellis football pitches are dependent on the other application. So 9 is now 8 and 8 is now 9. Okay, so the new item 8 on the agenda is the Arterial Hub, Sports Ground and former Fireman's Club. It's pages 137 to 190 in your books. And I'd like Alan, if you would, to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is the former Fireman's Sports and Social Club on Purfleet Road in Aveley, Essex. Okay, so here is the site, obviously outlined in red. There is the Cardo Distribution Centre to the north, the Purfleet Road running east-west, the A13 running along the eastern boundary, and over to the west here is the Purfleet Industrial Estate. Here is it's quite a useful plan that's been supplied by the applicant, which shows the trees running through the site, shows the trees around the boundaries. This is up along the northern boundary. Appreciate the orientation isn't quite right. And local wildlife site over here, and then Fans Farm here, which has a Grade 2 listed building on the site. Photos outside of the site. Here's the existing site entrance on Purfleet Road. We have the pavilion building that is on the site at the moment. Obviously, it's closed, it's disused, it doesn't have any occupation at the moment. There's some of the trees which are subject to tree preservation order. And then within the site, as you can see, it's relatively dishevelled, unused. There's a view over here on the left-hand photo towards Fans Farm. And then here is the proposed site plan. So the application, it's approximately 16.7 hectares. The proposals are for 43,640 square metres of flexible B2 and B8 employment floor space with ancillary office use. And as you can see here, they're obviously large buildings. They range in height from 13 up to 18.2 metres to the ridge. Here's the properties again on Purfleet Road that abut the site. And then down here on Arterial Road are properties that abut the site as well. Again, you can see here they're relatively utilitarian buildings. They're proposed to graduate the colour of the building in a grayscale as it progresses up the building, so it get paler to blend in with the surroundings around it. And here are some sections. So this is a section showing the view from Arterial Road. So there's existing trees along the front of the boundary at the moment. You can see the grey buildings behind, and then over here on the right-hand side, you can see the beginning of the houses on Arterial Road. Here's another section below which shows how it would be from the A13 to give you an idea of the site levels across as you progress across the site. And here's a section which shows you've got Purfleet Road on the left-hand side of the page. You have existing housing, then you have the boundary, and then you have the spacing here where they're proposing SUDS features and sort of open wetland. And then here are here's one of the proposed buildings, this Unit 1. Here's a CGI of the site from above, as give you an idea, a bit more of a 3D concept of it. You can see they've got like a green square that is part of the site, which would be on the Arterial Road side. This is a view from Arterial Road. And then the summary of the application here. So it is a site located within the Greenbelt. It has a partial brownfield site status. Ecological enhancements are proposed on and off site to get the biodiversity net gains that are required. Being a former private sports ground, has been inactive since 2015, but mitigation is proposed off site with qualitative improvements to Belhurst Park, which proposes 2 full-size artificial grass pitches, pavilion, spectator areas, trim trails, biodiversity improvements, also putting green and some golf provision, and contribution towards bowls facilities at Aveley and Thames Sports bowls clubs. That be secured by Section 106, and also a Grampian condition is proposed. Please note that the condition that's proposed at the moment, which talks about no occupation of this scheme until the artificial pitches are provided, is going to be amended slightly, because in the event that for whatever reason the artificial pitches couldn't be delivered, we want to make sure there'd be a fallback mechanism whereby we would get the equivalent sum in a financial contribution that the council could use on sports provision over at Belhurst. The applicants are still working out what that would be at this point in time, but it's somewhere in the region of about £2 million. Planning permission would not be issued until that was fully bottomed out, and also including the Section 106 legal agreement that would need to be signed off before the decision went out. So, being in the Greenbelt, obviously, since December 2024, the new National Planning Policy Framework was issued, which provided the provision of grey belt. And I'm sure we've all heard quite a lot about that in the last few months at planning committees. But essentially, you have to consider whether or not a site strongly contributes to 3 of the 5 Greenbelt purposes, and they're listed here. So Part A is to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas. In this instance, it's considered that by developing the site, it would not lead to unrestricted sprawl, because Aveley is not a large built-up area, neither is this part of Purfleet. The Purfleet industrial estate is also functionally and spatially separated from the main part of Purfleet by way of a Greenbelt wedge which runs between the two. So in that regard, and bear in mind the policy test is whether or not this site strongly contributes to that purpose, it's considered it doesn't strongly contribute to preventing unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas. Regarding B, it's about the site's performance in preventing towns from merging. I'm sure you would have seen there was an addendum item issued with regards to this report, whereby the report stated that Aveley was a village. Colloquially, it is often referred to as a village. We don't have it defined in our own planning policies at this point in time with regards it's a village or a town. It's open to interpretation, but our evidence base is stating that it is a town. But as per the addendum item, that distinction doesn't affect the assessment that we've undertaken or the conclusions that have been given in this report. So essentially, Purfleet industrial estate, physically and functionally separated from the main settlement of Purfleet to the south, to the extent that the site, the application site, does not strongly contribute to preventing does not contribute to preventing towns merging. So in that regard, there's no, doesn't strongly conflict with that. And then regarding Part C, that regards historic towns, and there's no historic towns in the borough, so that's not relevant. It's worth noting that there was a previous application on this site for 501 dwellings that was called in by the Secretary of State, and it was dismissed, and it was dismissed on Greenbelt grounds. Now, that inspector's report and also the report from the Secretary of State refers to how the site made some contribution to the purposes that I've referred to. Only some, but the policy position is materially different now. It's not whether or not it has some contribution to that purpose, it has to strongly contribute to that purpose. So in that regard, we are content, given that historic decision on the site, we're in a different policy position now, and therefore this site could be considered as grey belt land. The report also refers to the golden rules, which are on the National Planning Policy Framework. They're only relevant if it's a residential scheme. We've taken legal advice on that. So although the report refers to meeting the golden rules, there is no requirement for a commercial development such as this to meet the golden rules. Again, that doesn't affect the assessment that's been provided in the report or the conclusions within that report. So the direction of travel in the emerging local plan is that the site has been identified as an alternative option as a Tier 1 employment site. It's obviously well linked to the strategic road network. It's well linked to the existing Purfleet industrial estate. Delivers a substantial amount of employment floor space in what's known as small to medium-sized employment units, which our own studies have identified there's a shortfall within the borough. It creates jobs during the construction and the operation phase, and supports local skills development for an employment and skills strategy, which will be secured in the Section 106 agreement. As such, Chair, the application is recommended for approval.
Thanks, Alan. Right, we have 2 statements. So before I give the opportunity to question Alan, There are two statements to come. We have one statement of objection from Brenda Marrow. Sorry, three statements. One statement of objection from Brenda Marrow, which I will read. One statement of objection received from the ward councillor, Srikamp, and one statement of support received from Lauren Patel, who is the applicant's representative. So we'll take them in that order. So, I suppose that means I need to give myself 3 minutes. So, statement of objection from Brenda Marrow. I have lived at my current property for over 60 years and have in that time endured the seemingly endless decline in the local area. The properties at the end of Purfleet Road have become increasingly isolated, starting some years ago with the construction of the new A13 and most recently the Ocado warehouse. The latter is a major eyesore with a fence over 10 metres in height, creating a depressing view and blocking daylight. The addition of the development to the rear of my property will further isolate us and effectively make us an island. It will also block daylight so that my property will now be in shadow most of the day. The Ocado development devalued my property, although I was told it would not, and has made all the properties less desirable and harder to sell. The new development will further devalue these, even though I'm sure I will be told otherwise. Purfleet Road outside my property has become a car park since the Ocado development, with cars stretching the entire length at times, creating a significant hazard to other road users and pedestrians. With the new development, this will no doubt increase significantly. The Ocado development has car parking, but this obviously is not used, so I can expect the same with the new development. The new development will continue to contribute to the already poor air quality around us with the A13, A1306 and Ocado traffic. Access and egress to the proposed development will be hazardous onto the A130. This road is already very busy at all times of the day. If access is to be via Purfleet Road, I can only imagine the effect on my property in terms of noise and vibrations and my mental health. When there is an incident in the area, i.e. the QE2 bridge, the whole area becomes very rapidly gridlocked. Increasing traffic will only add to this. There will be noise pollution from the heavy freight lorries. Ocado said they would alleviate this, and they did by building the huge fence mentioned above. During the construction of the Ocado warehouse, I had to endure construction traffic noise and the whole property shaking during weeks of pile driving. I would have to go through all this again. I've conducted a basic search on Google and easily found in excess of 70 empty warehouses ready for letting in the area. This begs the question, why do we need more? The site was recently refused planning for housing development for all the reasons given above, so unless I am mistaken, nothing has changed to allow this development. Indeed, the road traffic has increased since previous planning was declined. The best use of the site would be for use as very much needed sports facilities and green space, something that is very much lacking in the area due to the council approving developments such as this. I believe that any Section 106 funds from the developers are destined to be used in the Bellis area. So surely, as this development is in the Aveley area, that is where any monies must be used. Okay. How did I do for my minutes? Thank you. Okay, I'm not sure that I'll be able to answer any factual questions on Mrs. Marrow's behalf, but at least you've had the statement. So I would like next to ask Councillor Panjala to come and read his statement. I think the chair at the front is set up for you, Shrikant. So you have 3 minutes, and then there'll be time for any factual questions.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak regarding the planning application number 24/00332 by full. I'm having objection about this development. As a local ward resident and elected ward councillor for Aveley and Uplands, I am deeply concerned about the negative implications this proposed development would have on our community. Loss of community and faith spaces, residents in Aveli and uplands have witnessed a steady decline in community and faith-based centers over recent years. These spaces are essentials in supporting social cohesion, mental well-being, and community identity. Sadly, this trend of neglect continues, while no meaningful effort is being made to protect or review such vital community assets. Lack of investments in sports and play facilities. For over a decade, there has been no significant development or improvement of public sports and play areas in our ward. Young people and families are left without accessible recreational spaces, which only impacts physically health, but also limits community engagement and opportunities for positive youth activities. Instead of investing in much needed amenities for residents, such as parks, playgrounds, and sports facilities, this application proposes further industrial expansion directly within or near residential zones. This is not a direction our community supports. Impact of industrial overdevelopment. There is a growing industrial presence in and around the Aveli and uplands, and it is having real-world consequences for our local people. Many residents are struggling to sell their homes with property values declining as industrial development increases. The only over-industrialization of this area is not only reducing the quality of life, but also financially harming long-term residents. Environmental and health concerns. Additionally, industrial development will exacerbate existing issues of air pollution, noise, and traffic congestion. These environmental impacts pose a serious threat to public health and contradict efforts to build greener, healthier communities. Conclusion and request. The people of Aveli and uplands deserve better. They deserve access to community spaces, investments in youth and recreational facilities, and a local environment that prioritizes their health and well-being, not more warehouses or industrial infrastructure. I respectfully urge the Planning Committee to take these objections into serious consideration and reject this application in favor of development approach that truly serves our residents and safeguards the future of our community. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thanks, Srikanth. Any questions for Srikanth? Factual questions, that is. No? Srikanth, I've just got the one question. It's been mentioned twice. Do we have any statistical or other evidence for the assertion that the industrialization is leading to declining house values? Is there any factual basis for that?
This is, I heard from the residents, those who are living locally, in the near about the location areas. So officers can investigate that one and can get clarification if they want. I don't have any objection to investigate into this. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Great. You can return to your seat. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
And we have a third statement from Lauren Patel. Lauren, if you'd like to come down. So you'll have 3 minutes, and if you haven't used one of those things before, it's the button on the right that turns it on, so in your own time.
Thank you, Chair. The scheme before committee today has been carefully considered and subject to extensive pre-application discussions and public consultation over a number of years. The site benefits from a draft allocation in the emerging local plan. The development of this redundant and partially previously developed grey belt site would bring many economic benefits to Thurrock. It will also deliver a significant investment in top-class sports and recreation facilities for the local community at Bellis Park. The development would support Thurrock's future employment needs and its ambition to be a focus area for economic growth. Delivered by Mount Park, one of the UK's leading logistics and employment developers, the development will provide 7 small to medium, high quality and energy efficient modern units. The site represents a natural extension to Purfleet Industrial Park and has direct access to the strategic road network. The development will provide considerable new employment opportunities for Thurrock, including around 470 new full-time jobs. It would provide jobs for local people. Around a third would be highly skilled, and there would be significant training and apprenticeship opportunities. The development is estimated to deliver an annual economic output of £21 million gross value added, plus substantial annual business rate income of around £2 million per annum, helping future safeguard Thurrock's frontline services. The scheme has been well designed and respects adjacent residential dwellings, with generous separation distances, as well as retention and enhancement of substantial tree cover along the boundaries. The scheme has been designed with support from an access consultant and will be fully accessible and inclusive for all. We've worked extensively with Thurrock Highways, National Highways and TfL, who have no objections on highways grounds. A new access would be formed from Arterial Road, and the old access point on Purfleet Road would become pedestrian, cycle and emergency access only. We'd provide footpath and cycle upgrades along Arterial Road, linking to public right-of-way 145, as well as a new safe crossing. We'd also provide 2 new bus stops on New Tankor Road to serve the site and the wider community. Around 40% of the site will remain as green infrastructure. We'll provide new planting, formal and informal amenity areas, including a health and wellbeing garden, seating areas, trim trail and exercise equipment. The local wildlife site would be enhanced and managed in additional areas for new and existing ecological habitats created on site. We've also worked with the RSPB and will provide further biodiversity net gain at nearby Rainham Marshes, where the RSPB have identified an area where they'd like to enhance. In summary, the site is considered grey belt under the terms of the MPPF, and its development will constitute appropriate development in the green belt. We propose substantial benefits, including top-class sports provision at Bellas Park, which would be delivered before the employment units were occupied. Thank you for your time and consideration of this application.
Thanks, Lauren. Any questions, Councillor Maney?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much for that. As ward councillor for Averley, I also live in Purfleet Road. This access road, you say there is going to be a pedestrianised area. How will that prevent the traffic down Purfleet Road, which at current is at capacity?
Yeah, the existing access point on Purfleet Road will be closed to traffic. It will be emergency access only, but to allow permeability through the site, it will allow pedestrians and cycles through. So we also have conditions in terms of HGV routing, etc. So they will have to come out of the new Arterial Road exit and go straight onto the strategic network up to Weddington roundabout. So they won't pass along Purfleet Road. That will be controlled by the management plan.
Thank you. I'd require a bit more convincing of that, actually, because the fact that the cars won't use Purfleet Road more than they do now, I think, with respect, I think that might be cobblers.
I feel compelled to... I was only going to ask Lauren if you wanted to offer any further evidence, because I think it's a fair question. If you're not convinced, then how can the applicant convince you?
That's fine. We have purposefully added the new entrance on Arterial Road to alleviate traffic going down Purfleet Road, and to remove that existing access and the traffic along there. It will be controlled through a management plan. You know, there will through condition and through the legal agreement. If for whatever reason a HGV lorry does accidentally go down Purfleet Road, there will be a mechanism in place for the council to come back at the developer for doing that, because that would be going against the management plan that is in place. So it should be well controlled.
Thanks, Jackie. I think Kathy is next, then Russell, then Erin.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question. I'm also ward councillor in Averley and Uplands. It was just, I was talking to a resident the other day about this, and he said there was, which I remember happening, there was a consultation event at the hub in Averley. And he was concerned because a lot of people there, they wrote comments and things and put them, there was a box to collect their comments. But he wondered what had happened to those comments because they don't appear on the council website. So I said I'd ask.
Oh yes, at pre-application stage we did do a public exhibition at Averley Forum at the Hub. That was a kind of private thing that we did for the developer. It wasn't part of the application itself, so those don't tend to appear on the application website. We have included a summary of all the responses that were made into the box at the public consultation event, both in my planning statement that supported the application that was submitted after the event, and also we submitted a statement of community involvement as well, which also outlines all the responses that the neighbours had at the public event before we submitted the application. But they don't tend to appear, the actual letters don't tend to appear on the council's website because they don't form part of the application itself.
Thanks, Kathy. Russell, your question is next.
Thank you, Chair. It seems quite a well thought out plan. Concerning Greenbelt elsewhere, I've noticed recently we've built a lot on Greenbelt elsewhere, solar farms. Nothing in the writing here suggests that you're putting solar panels on the roof to use the opportunity. However, I did notice on the plan drawing, it looked like there was some solar panels. Will you be using the opportunity with your roof space to include solar panels, contributing to the grid so that we don't have to look elsewhere on Greenbelt land, elsewhere in Thurrock, to have solar farms, which I'm afraid are destroying the Greenbelt?
Yes, absolutely. We've looked through the application to maximise energy efficiency as much as we can, and there will be solar panels on the roofs.
Thank you, Russell. Aaron next, and then Jackie, if that's okay.
Cheers, Chair. You stated a lot of positivity in regards to economic advantages, including apprenticeships. Is there any businesses who are ready to go in if this was to be built?
There has been a lot of interest from specific users, yes, and they have been, Mount Park have been approached by people who want to take up these units.
But there's been no contract signed or anything?
Not at this stage, not before planning's
So
granted.
things could change between now and then, and they could change their mind?
You need to turn your between.
Possibly, yes. As far as I'm aware, I don't think Mount Park have signed contracts with any end users yet. Obviously, they probably can't do that until the planning permission is granted, because there may not be a development to build ultimately if you don't grant planning permission. So I think the discussions will be preliminary at the moment, but I am aware from that Mount Park have been approached by many users.
Yep, follow-up question?
It's not a follow-up, but it's regarding, you mentioned the two bus stops on Tank Hill Road. Where on Tank Hill Road are you looking at putting them?
The position has been agreed towards the north end, so it's quite close to the site, but obviously not too close to the junction, because that wouldn't be safe. But they're on the northern side of New Tank Hill Road, so they'd also serve the RSPB.
So that would be on the bridge as you go from Averley into Purfleet.
I think it would be after it's between where the high-speed rail link goes across and where it meets Arterial Road. So it's in that section. They're in that section there.
I've got more comments on that, but I think it's better for...
Yeah, no, if you stick to the questions now, and obviously the comments you can bring up at the debate stage. Thanks, Aaron.
Finished.
Jackie, you have a further question?
Thank you, Chair. Can I talk about the offset for Bellis or not yet?
I mean, it probably makes more sense to talk about that when we get to Bellis.
Yeah, okay.
If you have a question about this application in terms of how it is impacted by the offset, feel free.
No, it's probably can wait for Bellis, I think. All right,
Great.
thank you, Chair.
No worries. And I think, Kathy, you have a further question.
Yeah, that's while you're there, if you don't mind. On the reports, there was Urban Design, who council. They've suggested that the grey isn't appropriate there because the terrain that's appropriate if you're on a motorway and basically there's sky. That's fine, but this is surrounded by trees and houses and things, and they're suggesting a granulated cladding rather than. So is that something you would consider?
Yes, definitely. What the officers have done they've added a condition, a proposed condition to the list, which requires further discussion on the exact materials with the design officer post determination, so that we can agree what would be appropriate between us.
Thanks, Kathy. Any further questions for Lauren? Great. Thanks, Lauren. So I will now invite you to put your questions to Alan in terms of the application report. So I've got Aaron, followed by Roy, followed by Kathy. Aaron, on you go.
This is probably more for Julian. Regarding the bus stops in Tank Hill Road, the applicant has just mentioned. I take it you know Tank Hill Road, where they mentioned quite well. In my opinion, that's not a suitable location to put them on that rail link. What's your view on that?
I don't believe they're directly on the rail link. I think, as was explained, that they're between the bridge and the junction. So they've been looked at in terms of the public transport. People have looked at their locations as well, and they've deemed that they're acceptable. I think you've got to realise that they need to be put in a position that's within a reasonable distance of the site and safe to get to. Don't forget that the bus is probably only a stop 30 seconds, a minute, maybe a couple of minutes at the most. So they're not exactly creating a significant safety hazard.
Even being on that bend?
They're not necessarily going to be on the bend. They're going to be on the rise before you get to the bend.
Respectfully, I disagree with you, but that's where we are. That's it, Chair. Thank you.
That's fine. I'm sure we can find some way of demonstrating where exactly the thing is, whether it's on the bend or on the rise. Presumably there's a map somewhere that takes us out of our hell of unknowing.
Yeah, we can ask the public transport people to review the sites again to make sure that they're happy with their locations.
Does feel like a factual one to me, so yeah, we should be able to sort that one out. Okay, thank you. Roy, you're up next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alan, for your report. This one's for Alan. How close are the warehouses to the existing properties on Purfleet Road? I believe they're bungalows. So can we get a slide up to see how close they are? Have we got one that's looking on? So, say from the A13, the old A13?
So if we're talking about just Purfleet Road,
so they're reasonably close, Alan, looking at that, aren't they?
It's a very substantial site. So actually, like you say, it looks like they're very close when you look at a plan of this scale. But the closest distance, and I'm just okay. So the closest unit, the closest point to the actual dwellings on Purfleet Road is 61 metres. Now that's the dwellings, it's to the actual dwelling rather than to the actual property boundary. You're at least, and like you say, it looks like a small gap, but the minimum distance of the building to the boundary, you're at least 25 metres from the boundary. So like I say, although the distance looks close on a plan of this scale, the distance is, an average garden is, on a new build would be about 12.5 metres. So you're looking at 2 garden depths in terms of the distance of the unit from the property boundary. And then...
Thank you. So, what sort of barrier are we looking to install between the rear of the properties and the development?
So you have got the existing trees and hedging along the boundary at the moment. They are to be retained and enhanced, and that will be by planning condition. We have been discussing with the applicants with regards to when planting would occur, and we would expect planting to occur long before the occupation of the buildings. And actually, the planting can establish on the site as the buildings are going up to create that screening at the earliest possible opportunity. And the planning condition also states that if any tree or hedge or anything that's been planted from the day it was planted, if it dies or gets destroyed within 5 years, it has to be replaced by the developer as well.
Second follow-up will be allowed, Roy.
Thank you, Chair. What height are the buildings at that point where it's closest to the properties? Is that one of the highest buildings? And if it is there any recommendations that could be put into, that would be a bit lower, because I heard what was mentioned before height-wise.
Yes, so the section drawing is probably the most useful one here. So so here's Purfleet Road, here's the house, and then you can see the distance to the building. So it's got a ridge of 22.6. So it's not the tallest building. So like I say, the range is from 13 metres to 18.2, and they've looked to mitigate as far as possible with regards to where the Purfleet Road. This is not the closest point to residential properties. The distance, as you can see there, is actually, I say, it's at least 25 metres from the boundary itself. So 15, 16 metres in height.
Thanks, Roy. Kathy, I think you've got the next question.
Yeah, thank you. I will just say it does look like the house is dwarfed, but anyway. My question is about the merging of Aveley and Purfleet, which is obviously a delicate balance, because previously development wasn't allowed because it said that piece of greenbelt prevented the merging of Aveley and Purfleet, and now you say it is only slightly preventing the merging. It's a question of degree, isn't it? So I'd like to see on a map. I don't know where else they are separated, because from the 1306, you've got the Purfleet Industrial Estate, then you've got, there's another industrial estate on the left-hand side of Tank Hill Road, and then you're pretty much straight away onto the Garrison. I can't see, apart from the Mardyke runs through, so that is a barrier, and the train line. But I can't really see that there's a lot of separation between the two, whether they're towns or villages doesn't seem relevant.
Yes, so I fully understand what you're saying there, and it is a very new world with regards to grey belt, but the test is very clear. A parcel of land or land needs to contribute strongly to those purposes, and in this instance, it is unusual. But as you say, the Mardyke, where the Mardyke is, that's actually, as that cuts through, that is greenbelt. So that does, and I appreciate it's not a huge amount of land, but it does separate the Purfleet industrial estate and this piece of land from the main part of Purfleet. And obviously, as officers, we do need to take a view with regards to the function and the spatial form of how settlements work. But in our view, that cutting, that segregation, which is created by that swathe of greenbelt which runs along the Mardyke, is considered sufficient to separate it and not have this merging of towns occur. The other point about the Secretary of State's decision, it was thrown out on greenbelt grounds. That's absolutely right. It's stated in the report, and one of the main things is reference to openness. Now, it's how we have to assess it. It's a very different world now. If it doesn't contribute to 3 of the 5 purposes of the green belt, it can be construed as grey belt. And once you become grey belt, the matter of openness is no longer a consideration. So openness was a big part of the reason why Secretary of State threw it out. Openness no longer relevant. And actually that Secretary of State decision was very clear in that it said this application site, or the appeal site as it was then, it made some contribution to those purposes. So even seeing back then, which was long before the introduction of grey belt, it states some, whereas now the policy test is it has to strongly contribute to those purposes. So it's materially different, and that's why we've taken the view this site is indeed grey belt.
Okay, just to come back, I would put forward that that's a subjective judgment whether it strongly contributes or not. And it's a much larger area than the Mardyke embankment. So to me, that is a significant separation between the two towns. But, you know, we can see things differently.
Thanks, Kathy. Any further questions? Steve.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Sisterson's, to some extent at least, gone down the avenue I was going down. No big surprise, I guess. But I noticed, Alan, in your wording, it uses the word, which I find difficult to manage, partial brownfield. And my understanding of that site is the brownfield part would be the building. Sorry, yeah? No, yes? So in actual fact, when it says partial, what it means is a very small part of it is brownfield, not greenfield.
Yes, that's right. And again, the Secretary of State's decision referred to the site being partial brownfield. So it's in an inspector's decision, it's in a Secretary of State decision, but I appreciate it's only a very small part of that site.
Thank you. So that's my first point, is that it's partial. As far as the grey belt, and again, Councillor Sisterson has already brought this slightly into line, but the topic of grey belt, the bottom line is, at this moment in time, that site is a green belt site, except the little brown field bit that's already there, which is the building. So it's very subjective to suddenly turn around and say, oh, well, actually, if you look at the new planning rules, it could be construed as grey field or any other colour you choose, but the bottom line is, it is greenbelt. So, given what you've said, there's nothing to stop somebody now, if you're saying those rules have all gone out of the window, which I'd argue they haven't, then there's nothing to stop somebody putting the 570 houses on it, in principle.
Yeah, so varying back to the point about greenbelt, yes, it is still greenbelt. Grey belt is land within the greenbelt, so it's still the greenbelt. The question about whether or not you could come in with houses on that site. Now, obviously, we wouldn't want to predetermine any planning application, but in principle, as if it's concluded that a site is grey belt, then yes, you could have a form of development such as housing or commercial. We're not saying it's grey belt and only commercial can be put on this site. We are saying it's grey belt and therefore development is not inappropriate.
Thank you. So subjectively grey belt, I'd kind of, I would suggest. And to say it doesn't contribute to the green belt, and exactly what Councillor Sisterson was saying, I would argue very much as she does, that actually it does constitute, as the inspector said previously, because it does provide a significant barrier between those two villages, towns, call them what you will. I'm not going to lose sleep over that part. But the bottom line is it does segregate them, and therefore that's why I'm struggling with the dialogue that I was reading in here, talking about it's partial brownfield. Well, partial is it's a bit like having a shed on it almost. I know it's a bigger building than that, but I just struggled with that. But thank you for your answers, Alan. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. So just briefly, you mentioned obviously the offset of this is the benefit of the football pitches at Bellis. That was in your summary as a benefit, so it should be okay to ask that question. You mentioned that for whatever reason, if those pitches weren't built, then you would consume that funds via Section 106. But if it was approved, I mean, Impulse Leisure seem to be on board with it. I'm trying to work out a scenario of why it wouldn't go ahead. Is that just a technicality? So, because for me, I would like to see that in there, that those pitches are there. And Section 106 drawback's okay, but it might not deliver us what we want. So it was just a query on that. Thank you.
Yes, so there's nothing to suggest that the developer would not be implementing the artificial pitches. There's nothing in there, but ultimately we always have to take a look at the worst case and have a fallback, just in the extreme circumstance that it doesn't get delivered for whatever reason. But like you say, it's Impulse Leisure, it's leased by the council. They are on board with regards to having it on site. Obviously, it's a wonderful facility to have, but we just need to have that fallback in there. It's a just in case, it's a last resort position.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then one other question. Or did you want? I may have missed this in the report somewhere, but with our upcoming local plan, obviously we do have to hand over particular sites. I have seen this particular site in potential variations of the upcoming local plan. So is that in your thought process? Because ultimately, if this was approved, then would that be consumed as us handing over development land in our upcoming local plan, or could it be changed? It was just really around this site seems to be earmarked for something. It was in variations of our local plan, so where are we with that? Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously the local plan is still evolving at this point in time, but the Regulation 18 is published. It's referenced in the committee report, and it's shown as an alternative option for a Tier 1 employment site. And just looking at the direction of travel at the moment, obviously Regulation 18 plan, limited weight at this point in time. But from the evidence base going forward, you can see the logic in this site obtaining an allocation, but obviously we're not predetermined, and when we leave that to the local plan process. But you can see the logic there, and there's commentary within the report regarding that.
Thanks, guys. Jackie, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Alan. I think I can talk about the offset for Bellis, because if this doesn't go through, then there'll be, I assume, no application for Bellis. Why have we got 2 artificial pitches? Why have we not got proper grass?
The artificial pitches, they are the artificial grass pitch is a facility that can be used to an incredibly intensive level. You can use it for about 80 hours a week. And you've got the floodlights, which means you can use it from 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. every day, regardless of the only thing which will stop play on an artificial pitch is snow. A conventional grass pitch you can only really use for about 6 hours a week. So there's an incredible differential with regards to how much it can be used. You speak to people who play football, the amount of times games are called off because of waterlogged pitches. I was speaking to somebody about this matter, and the type of rain we get, it's more intensive in rainfall, so you can end up getting the waterlogging very easily on football pitches. It's supported by Sport England. It's supported by our playing pitches strategy because of the level of usage it can get. And in my experience, as soon as one of these are put in place, they are booked out. They're just booked out all the time. They're a fantastic facility to have. And so if you had a normal grass pitch with all these floodlights and the pavilion, you can only use it a fraction of the time compared to an artificial pitch. So while I fully understand with the ecological side of it, that's why the applicants have got the biodiversity net gain offset to the south of the pitches, which is at least 10% betterment than what's on there at the moment. So you would actually get that ecological gain anyway, even though they would be putting the artificial pitches on a driving range at the moment.
Thanks, Alan. So you said about flooding. Am I right in saying that if the artificial pitch does flood, because they do, don't they? Sometimes they pool in areas?
They shouldn't do. They should be appropriately drained.
Okay, well, let's say they're not, for the sake of argument. Do the chemicals in them not travel? Do they not pollute, the chemicals?
Yes, there were studies about it, and there have been articles about it, because I think they use a kind of an aggregate as a derivative of tyres, actually, and it's a sort of way of recycling. But my understanding is there's been no link with regards to harm to health, although I appreciate some people think there is.
Sure, yeah. Sorry, Alan, do you mind turning your microphone off? Thanks. Kathy, you want to ask another question?
Yeah. Sorry, one more. And you talked about the golden rules, and you sort of taken the wind out of my sails a little bit if they're not applicable to commercial developments. But if we still just look at them, one of the golden rules, it includes that there needs to be demonstrable unmet need. Now, I don't think there's demonstrable unmet need for warehouses. We've got a really huge warehouse.
Sorry, Councillor, that's becoming a statement. Is there a question there?
No, that was, I'll save it for the debate. Thank you.
No worries. I mean, I think we're moving into the debate now anyway, so how about I suggest you start the debate, in which case you can say what you're going to say.
Thank you. Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say before we go on to the debate, in terms of the golden rules, we obviously need to disregard the golden rules because they apply to housing. So please do not consider those as part of your decision making.
So the only thing you need to remember about the golden rules is to forget them. On this occasion. Kathy.
Okay, so, you know, I will still say I don't think there's demonstrable need for more warehouses, whether that's a golden rule or not. Because we've got a really, really large warehouse on the Purfleet side of the 1306. Brenda Mara, in her statement, apparently Googled vacant warehouses and found 70 in the I don't know what area she covered. I go along the river bank quite often towards Rainham. There's it's called Momentum. There's about 3 big warehouse blocks. They've been empty. I think they must have been there at least 2 years, and they're still not let out. So I'm not convinced. I think it's a shame the application wasn't. They say they're small to medium size units, but to me they look very large units. And if it was small to medium, maybe office blocks or something, maybe with an accompanying sports field, something like that, it would have been much easier to accept. But I'm not convinced, especially with there being no identified end users, that we have a need for the warehouses.
Thanks, Kathy. It's Tom next, then Jackie, then Roy, then Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. So, me personally, I do, and I've come to the conclusion this is a fantastic scheme. I do think this is something that we should be going ahead with. For me, I sometimes look at the bigger picture of the economy. It's currently in a dire state. You know, we celebrate growth figures of 0.1% in this country. Politicians go on a victory lap. It's simply not good enough. And also, I've read in the news today that job seeking has increased at its fastest pace in 5 years. So it is tough out there. And for me, I think we're actually quite lucky to have investors who are willing to invest in Thurrock and provide those types of jobs. And then obviously the other part of the scheme, as detailed out, was a benefit was the phenomenal monies available for Bellis. I think it's a fantastic area. It does need a bit of regeneration. We're very lucky to have Impulse. I think they do the best they can, but they do need external support as well. So for me, I think absolutely we should be supporting this scheme. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Jackie?
Thanks, Chair. Where were we? Yeah, I think there's an overabundance of industrial sites close to residential dwellings, especially in Purfleet Road, and not just because I live there. There's no question of it, and I have concerns about the demarcation. I don't think there's any clear demarcation between Purfleet and Averley at all. And I appreciate you've put forward your arguments about the previous application, but it was rejected by the Planning Inspectorate on very good grounds, and for obvious reasons, I won't be supporting it. But thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Roy?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I feel concerned with the residents at Purfleet Road. They, possibly a few years ago when Ocado was put up, that was actually blew them away. It was so vast building right in front of them, and now they're going to have this behind them. We kind of like neglected our residents down there. I know possibly there's got to be something there that's been sitting there empty for quite some time, but probably not on this scale. I just feel that it's a bit, once again, it's going over the top with the height of these buildings. They're going to have that both sides. If there was some sort of, should we say, right, we're going to take that over, it's like they're encroaching around the actual residential area. They've cut that off now. The A13's gone through there. It's not part of Aveley now. Where is it? It sits in no man's land now. Them residents down there, and as they say, their properties have been devalued by quite considerable amount of money, and it's going to be more so if this is allowed. I feel that something needs to be built there, but possibly not on this scale. Thank you.
Thanks, Roy. Aaron?
Thank you, Chair. I will refer to 13.3.14b, the demonstrable unmet need for employment land. I don't think that has been met in this situation. In this situation, we have so many empty warehouses, and they want to build more empty warehouses in that area, which is making this not met. And in regards to the economy, we ain't even got an end user of these warehouses. If neighbouring warehouses that were built over 5 years ago can't be used, what is the guarantee we can get this property used? So with that, Chair, I think this is not suitable development in this area, the demarcation area. So I would be voting against this.
Thanks, Aaron. Russell? And then Steve.
Yeah, I very much support what Councillor Kelly said in relation to this development. It looks quite exciting to me. They said they're going to leave us with 40% of green belt in the development. It will provide much needed work in the area for people, which hopefully, if they're from the area, will cut down on travelling and commuting elsewhere. So I think, as it appears, it's a good development. Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. Steve?
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, I've already made the point, I think, that how you designate what's brown, green, grey, and any other colour you choose is a fairly subjective measure, and I respect what Alan's saying. However, I have to say I'm not aligned with that thinking. But what really concerns me is wherever there's a piece of greenbelt and we lose it, we never, ever, ever get anything back in terms of greenbelt. So I wonder what, in perhaps 3 or 4 generations from now, when we're part of Greater London, and it's just one big mess like a good many other cities in the world, I wonder what our offspring might think about the decisions we make with some of these things. But once it's gone forever, that's for sure. And the other point I was going to make, and it cropped up in one of the speakers, I've been invited to a number of sort of pre-planning, come and see what we're thinking of doing events. And the one thing that is, to me, blindingly obvious when they do it is they try to get people to fill in a form or talk to them and explain what their concerns are. And as somebody said about residents having put forward their objections, but then where did they ever disappear to? Well, my take on it is that the reality of people doing that is that it tells the people that are putting the plan together what they're going to try to come up with excuses and mitigation within their plan. So in other words, it kind of preempts. Now, you can argue that that's a sensible thing to do, but from a resident's point of view, they're almost being conned into giving away their objection at an early stage. And that I've seen more and more and more of in the last 2 or 3 years. It's now very, very commonplace with whatever the developers are. But I think my big problem with this one is simply that the one thing we keep getting beaten up over is housing supply. So there was a housing application, that got bounced. Now we're being told the rules have changed. And you think, well, at least it would contribute to our housing supply if we're not in need of more warehouses. So that's kind of my view of it and my take on it. Much as I appreciate everybody else's sort of perspective, it just, for me, if we're going to have to do it, would that not be a better thing to put there? Although, personally, I'd rather we didn't put anything there. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. Jackie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just really wanted to mention the parking as well down there. As was previously alluded to, the Ocado site's got a car park, but nobody uses it. I mean, when you come round that bend, as you go onto the old A13, the cars, you have to stop for cars to come through. And when they come out of Ocado, they don't look, they pull straight out. And there's been a lot of near misses, and I've actually come round that bend and a van has come out. At the minute, them residents are really going through it with the amount of traffic coming through there and the speed that they're doing. I just cannot see how we can possibly think that putting another huge site opposite a colossal great site like Ocado is a good idea. I don't not like the plan, to be honest, and I prefer that to houses, to be blunt, but I don't want it there. I don't think that's the right site for it, simply because we have already got Ocado right opposite. The trees have died. The residents are looking at a building. Nobody come and replace the trees. Nobody watered them. It's just going to be one giant industrial site at the end of that road. And I do have to say something somebody else mentioned earlier. I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Srikanth. He said about property prices being devalued. It was you, Roy. I can say categorically, without actually saying any more than that the houses have been devalued. And I know that from personal effect the last week. So that's all I'm going to say on that.
Thanks, Jackie. If I may, I'd like to just add to that, because looking at further down, looking at the consultee responses, note that the travel plan is not seen as supported in its present form. I also noted that the environmental health wanted several planning conditions. The emergency planner feels that several conditions are required because we're in a flood zone. Conservation and heritage are not entirely happy with the plans as far as they affect Fans Farm. There appears to be a lot about this plan as it stands that seems to be alarming a lot of your consultees. I think what I'm hearing from the committee is that whilst I think for some of them it's a problem in principle, for most of you, you're saying it's not so much in principle, it's the where, and to a degree the how it's being proposed, the impacts on traffic, the effective isolation of a part of Purfleet, the impact on the distance, or the taking away of a distinction between Purfleet and Aveley. There are a lot of very concrete things that it won't do, or rather that it will do that are not good. And the main thing that it is that we're being asked to think that it will do that is good is meet an unmet need, which as we've discussed, I would hardly call it statistic, but a sort of, what's the word? A few checks on Google suggest that there isn't an unmet need, that there's actually an unneeded supply. So it feels at the moment like this plan as it stands needs more thought. needs more development to address the very real concerns that people have drawn up. And I just don't feel it's ready yet. It feels to me to be undercooked, and I don't think I can support it. And I will ask Ash to come in at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just to go back on a couple of points, as Councillor Green articulated, paragraph 13.3.14 of the report cross-references paragraph 145 of the MPPF. So need is relevant. So it's just the golden rules that aren't, but need absolutely is. So you can consider that. So really what members need to satisfy themselves is the cross-references to the evidence base that has been provided, which seeks to articulate the need. Now, where we are as a council is we haven't obviously formulated a local plan at this point in time. The council will need to come to a position on how employment need will be met. So all you can go on at this stage is obviously the Regulation 18, the evidence base that supported that. At that point in time, in terms of greenbelt, it hadn't covered whether it considered land to be greybelt, but you can give some weight to the Regulation 18. In terms of the evidence base, you just need to be satisfied that you have reviewed that evidence base and considered the need as set out within the evidence base. And you'll note, particularly within the ELAR, the Employment Land Availability Assessment, it does talk about mixed take-up rates. So there are high take-up rates at London Gateway, for example, that are cited, but it does also cross-reference vacant units, particularly larger ones. But ultimately, the question to members is, are you satisfied if you're coming to a decision on need, that you're comfortable with those documents? Now, if you're not, clearly members, officers can come back and bring that back to committee, but if you are, you are. I don't think there's anything else. Anything you wish to add? Okay.
Tom.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to come back and just put an opinion in on the need for the warehousing. As I said earlier on, if there is an argument at the moment that warehousing is not needed, that goes back to the point is that the economy is stuck in the mud. Why is the economy stuck in the mud? Well, it's stuck in the mud because we don't encourage enough investment, enough growth. I mean, these planning applications take 2-3 years to get to us. Now, that's part of the bigger picture. But just because there's an argument at the moment it's not needed now, that doesn't mean to say it won't be needed in the future. And you mentioned the sort of the London Gateway site, etc. I do a bit of work down there, and I mean, they're flying. They're absolutely flying. They're getting bigger and bigger. All those warehouses are being used. So it's just part of the bigger picture. A lot of people have said those warehouses are not needed. Well, that might be the case now, although I respectfully disagree. But that doesn't mean to say they won't be needed in the next coming years. But we're never going to get this economy moving if we don't start backing up investors. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to respectfully push back at Councillor Kelly regarding need and putting in and actually giving investors the right to come into the economy. We have a large warehouse within 5 minutes of this property, of this location, that has been vacant for over 5 years. I think we've given enough time. I do agree with Councillor Kelly, it does take time for investors to get here, but if we've got units vacant for over 5 years, maybe that is the wrong place to be putting industrial units in the borough.
Thanks, Aaron. Cathy?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with that. And also, and if we're unsure of the need, then the green belt is the very last place that we need to put things, because like Steve says, we won't get that green belt back. So, and also one quick thing about jobs. Now, Ocado down there, they are constantly advertising jobs. There's no end of driver jobs and warehouse jobs and things. There's such a turnover. Tesco warehouse as well on the bypass. They're always needing workers. So if we're looking for jobs, the jobs are actually there already, and we're not at the stage now that we're desperately needing new investment for jobs, because if anyone wants a warehouse job, they will find one very easily. So, and also I'd like to speak up for Brenda because she's got this house, she's 90 years old, she's lived on she was born in the house next door now, and when she was married, lives in the house she is in now. She's got Ocado opposite her, she's got the A13 in a big embankment behind her, and now we're talking about this massive building overlooking her on the other side, and I just think it's not fair, you know. So that's that.
Thanks, Kathy. Anybody else, or shall we move to the vote? Okay, so the recommendation is that the Chief Planning Officer be authorised to grant permission for the development, subject to those items set out in section 16 of the report, completion of an S106 obligation agreement, and conditions. So do I have a proposer for that? Councillor Kelly? Seconder? Councillor Cherry? All those in favour? Against? Okay, so the recommendation has failed. I guess we have two options. We have the option that we put an alternative recommendation to reject, or we have an option that we, if our problem is that we're not against in principle, but we're against it as it's currently constituted, then it might make more sense to defer. I'm putting those options to you because depending on where you are on it, the deferral might make more sense than an outright rejection. Any thoughts? Kathy?
I think in terms of rejection, I think we could do it on grounds of the merging of the two towns and also the unproved need for warehouse buildings in that location.
Any counter suggestions, or are you happy to move to that on those two grounds? So I'm going to put you on the spot, Kathy, and ask you to re-propose that so that we can make sure we all fully understand what's being proposed.
I'm not quite sure how to word it, but yeah, propose that the original proposition is rejected as it would necessitate the merging of the towns of Purfleet and Averley, and that the Greenbelt purpose would be lost because of that. And secondly, that there is not a proven need for this type of employment in that location.
Thanks, Kathy. I just got, as soon as I get intakes of breath or anything to my right, I just stop for a second, but assuming that I don't get anything back from here.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So from hearing the debate and Councillor Sisterton's draft motion, I think it, correct me if I'm wrong, obviously this needs to come from members, but it's as simple as that members or council citizens suggesting that this is inappropriate development in the green belt. They do not agree that it's grey belt. So it is therefore inappropriate development in the green belt, and you can cross-reference that need is not demonstrated, which is one of the tests that you were looking at. Dan, is there anything you wish to add to that?
Thank you. I think, yes, so it's essentially two of the parameters under para 155 of NPPF aren't made out, A and B.
So we have a proposer, Councillor Green. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Jones? All those in favour of rejecting on those grounds as just outlined by Council? So the sorry, yes, anybody against? My apologies, guys. I'm not trying to do you out of a vote. 2. And we have no abstentions, do we? Right, so the vote is carried, the proposal is rejected. Before we go any further, and thank you, Tom, for tipping me the wink, I would like to move a motion without notice to suspend Council Procedure Rule 11.1 to allow the meeting to continue beyond the 2.5-hour time limit, which is just hitting, on the grounds that we have a couple more items to consider. And yes, if you agree to that, you can have a loo break.
Are we going to do the Bellis? Or we will anyway, will we?
I believe so. We have, I've got a quick announcement from Ashley before we go further, which I'll basically hand over to Ashley and he can do.
Thank you, Chair. So I've had a discussion with the applicant's team for the next item. They wish to withdraw it from this committee meeting so they can take a view with their clients. It may well come back in the future, but yeah, we will be withdrawing it from this particular committee.
That is yes. Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, so obviously that's entirely their discretion. So if obviously they've got options, they do nothing and nothing happens, or they go to appeal. If they go to appeal, it can be turned over or respected. If it is turned over, then I assume that the application would then come back to committee at a later date. Thank you. Assuming.
Yeah, correct. So the inspector, let's assume if they appeal, obviously they need to discuss this with their clients in terms of their strategy. But the inspector will inevitably need to know what the council's view is on that application. So it may well come back, and it may well be at the next committee meeting. It's just at this stage they've asked for it to be withdrawn.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Right. So that takes us on to item 10, which is Thurrock Football Club. Before we go into this, I think I feel bound to point out that there could be some confusion here. This is an item, or this is an application that came before the committee and was passed a couple of years ago. See you later. Yes, sorry, councillors, you may rejoin us. You can rest assured we have been talking about you. So yes, so this is an application which came before this committee, I think a while back, and was debated and approval was given. Tonight's discussion is not to reconsider that approval, it is to discuss a variation which the applicant wishes to make because they've discovered an issue and they need to move part of the built form. So we won't be revisiting the original decision. We'll be hearing about and discussing whether we want to allow the applicant to move part of the proposed building. I hope that makes life a little bit clearer. Okay, so I would like to ask, do you know what? It says here, can I ask to present the report? So I'm really sorry, Liz. Apparently you're blank on here. So, Liz, if you'd like to present the report.
Councillor, you are more than welcome to present if you would like. But
No, I've already pretended to be a resident tonight. I've done enough play acting.
Okay.
On you go.
Thank you very much. Thank you, councillors. As Councillor Fletcher has just said, this application seeks to vary Condition 2 of Permission 22/01672 FUL. The original permission was for a vehicle pre-delivery inspection centre and was granted permission on the 25th of April 2024. Condition 2 of that permission was for development in accordance with approved plans. This current application seeks to change the approved position of the PDI centre and the associated car parking. The application does not, as stated in the agenda, involve the deletion of the boardwalk. This was initially part of the applicant's proposal. However, in response to consultation comments, this will continue to be a part of the approved scheme. The site is located adjacent to the Best Western Hotel and M25. The site, just in here, is bordered by the Mardyke River to the north. The site has remained unchanged since the permission was granted last year for its redevelopment. There are security cameras on the site. It is not actively used and has not been used as a football club for some time. I've tried to place the site layout as approved on the left and as proposed on the right. The building which they're seeking to move is the pre-delivery inspection centre, which was previously in the eastern part of the site. I'll see if I can just zoom in so you can see part of the problem. As you may know, there is a high voltage power pylon on the site and overhead lines across the site. The location of the PDI centre, as previously approved, actually fell within an easement sort of either side of the alignment of that power infrastructure. Hence the applicant coming back and seeking to amend the location and move it further to the southwest. So it's sort of moved from approximately this location down to the southwest, still within the site. And that now avoids any of the power infrastructure that's on the site. The relocation of the PDI centre has necessitated a change to the layout of the car parking on the site. However, the access to the site, the number of car parking spaces and so on remains unchanged. During the course of this application, there was a concern from Essex and Suffolk Water that the new location could actually fall within an easement for their own infrastructure. However, they weren't entirely sure where their water pipe was beneath the site. These things sometimes happen historically. So intrusive ground investigations have been undertaken by the applicant as well as Essex and Suffolk Water, and they have now confirmed that this amended a new position for the PDI centre would not fall within the easement. This is quite a short presentation. In conclusion, there are no objections from the public, statutory consultees or Thurrock consultees, and the Planning Service recommends approval of this application to vary the approved plans.
Thank you, Liz. Before we get on to questioning Liz, I have a statement of support here from Julian Sutton, applicant's representative. If you'd like to come down and join us, Julian. And it's just here on your right, and it's the button on the right that turns your microphone on. You've got 3 minutes, and then we'll ask the committee if they want to ask you any factual questions.
Thank you, Chair. As you've heard, the application before you tonight is simply a variation of the existing planning permission, and as such, your consideration tonight can relate only to the changes proposed in this amendment application, not matters relating to the original consent or the principle of the use on the site. Group 1 are committed to this site. They have been discharging planning conditions, a number of which are now approved. This is going to be developed as a PDI centre, and it will be the future home of Grays Athletic FC. In all respects, the application remains the same other than the location of the PDI building. As you've heard from the officer, the size and height of the PDI building, the number of car parking spaces, access arrangements, traffic movements in and out, all remain the same. And just to correct, the reason the applicant wishes to move the building is because there is a previously unknown water main that runs where the building is at the moment. So we need to move it. There is the easement that you've heard about because of the pylon in the middle of the site, which means we need to move the building the other side of it. The easiest and quickest way to solve this issue is to move the building. The applicant, if they wished, could secure an easement or move the pipe. Those options are expensive and time-consuming. And so the quickest way to deliver the benefits of this application is to move the building. This course of action will ensure that the benefits of this scheme, the quality jobs being created, the inward investment into Thurrock from a Fortune 300 company, and all of the transfer of the stadium to Grays Athletic FC and all of the community benefits which flow from that will occur as soon as possible. And these benefits were the reason, on balance, that this application was granted planning permission. There should be no reason whatsoever for any member tonight to unnecessarily delay these benefits. They were the very reason this committee granted planning permission in the first place. In respect to the relocation site, there are no objections from any statutory consultees, including the Environment Agency, in respect to flooding. And this is because the building is simply moving from one place in the flood zone to another. The size, its footprint remains the same, meaning the application proposals remain acceptable in flooding terms, as they did before. There is simply no change to or increase in the risk of flooding. I would also draw your attention to the fact that there are no local resident objections to this application at all, and it is therefore not considered that the proposed amendment to the permitted scheme on what is a grey belt site raises any concerns which would justify a withholding of planning permission tonight. To be clear, the applicant's intention is to develop a PDI centre on this site, and consequently, I would urge members tonight to support this application in line with the recommendation from your officers. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian. Before I open it to questions, just 2 points, if I may. Firstly, I don't know whether you were listening before you came down, but I'd already made it very clear that we won't be revisiting the original application, so I don't think you need to worry yourself on that account. Secondly, I would very strongly suggest that what this committee doesn't do is unreasonably delay things. What we do is have reasonable, rational discussion on the pros and cons of what's put before us. So if you don't mind, we will do that tonight. Thank you very much. Any questions? Srikanth.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. As you said that this development will going to create employment, so just I would like to know how many job employment opportunities will created through this development, and how many jobs will be given to the local ward people. Just I want to know the numbers if you have anything. Thank you.
Sorry, Srikanth, I just want to come back on this. The employment opportunities, etc., do not change as a result of the movement of this building. So we do need to restrict our discussion tonight to does it sit there or does it sit there, and what are the pros and cons of that. So any employment opportunities, etc., you can assume remain unchanged.
So my intention is to change anything. I don't have any intention to make decision to change. Just I want to know that just to clarity about the employment status, that one, benefits, just I want to know the benefits.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm saying to you is the benefits have already been discussed, and I mean, by all means ask for a restatement of them, but it's not relevant to this discussion tonight, because the benefits of the thing don't change as a result of this particular amendment.
Thank you, Chair, for clarification.
No problems.
I'll just an understanding for myself, because this is all new to me, this particular planning. Just to go and get it in my mind, we've got a DPI centre, no problem, but is it the football club is also there as well at the same time? So it's all together, the football club, a DPI centre. Fantastic, thank you.
Steve.
Thanks, Chair. I do remember the original...
And by the way, ask him, not me.
Sorry, I do remember the original one going through. I just wondered, just in your statement, that you made the point of saying it's a grey belt site, and it wasn't a grey belt site.
No, you're absolutely right. It wasn't at the time, because the grey belt didn't exist then.
No, and that in itself hasn't changed. So I just wondered why you felt a need to put grey belt site.
It's a purely descriptive term.
Okay, fine. No, I would argue that if we're not changing what was all agreed 3 or 4 years ago, then in fact it was a greenbelt site, and it still is considered a greenbelt site. But it was maybe accidentally put in, or okay. But fine, thank you.
Sorry, Liz, did you want to come in there?
Just to add on that point, because we weren't assessing the use or development, again, we were just looking at this repositioning. We didn't assess its greenbelt status under the wording within the NPPF. So it's use class designation, its designation within the local plan didn't really come into play on this specific application, only on the original one. And then that wording wasn't in the NPPF at that time.
No, and my point is, since we're not touching anything else and it's just moving the building around, it's somewhat irrelevant, which is why I questioned why it was actually put in there. But thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, so the idea of moving the building is that so you're not building above this water main, is that correct?
Correct, member, yes.
So we've got accessibility to maintenance on this water main if required, or is there any other part of the building that it goes under?
No, effectively it runs along the bottom of the site, and it was unknown it didn't come up on any searches. It was unknown at the time of the application. Otherwise, we clearly wouldn't have put the building on top of it. So unfortunately, we've now subsequently discovered there is this water main that runs through the site there. So we're not allowed to build on it without an easement or diverting it. So it's easier for us to move the building. There is, as you've heard, there is an easement that runs through the middle of the site because you can't build underneath, obviously, electricity pylons. So we have to kind of hop it and go the other side.
Thanks, Roy. Kathy?
Thank you, Chair. I was just concerned because the officer report said that it was being moved because of the pylons in the electricity. Then your statement said it was to do with this sewage main pipe. So there just seems to be a little bit of confusion. It's not right that the two statements don't agree. We can't be agreeing something where it's not very clear what we're agreeing to.
Well, I'm correct, but irrespective of the reason, the application before the amendment is the relocation of the building for whatever the reason might be. That is the proposal. The building is being relocated.
Okay, thank you. I'd be quite interested in the Essex and Suffolk Water statement, which it says that the proposed bin store and car transporter turning circle over the main would make future maintenance and repairs extremely difficult. So has that been resolved?
Yes, there's been meetings on site with the Water Authority. That is all resolved. The requirement was to move the requirement is to move the building.
Okay.
Yes, just to add, that was overcome because that was their initial consultation response, and then subsequent to that, they've done these intrusive investigations and had meetings to determine the position on the site that is acceptable and how the loading of both the building and the surrounding car parking is distributed over the water main to ensure that it doesn't damage their asset and that they can still have access to service it.
Thank you. It's just there's no record of that on the documents on the application. It'd be interesting to see, actually, especially as we've got disagreement between, it'd be interesting to actually see in black and white from Essex and Suffolk Water that they've agreed to that.
I can try and arrange that a letter directly from them following the meeting. All I can say is the correspondence from the agent for the application has been copied into Essex and Suffolk Water when they've emailed me to say this issue is resolved. So but I agree, for completeness, it would have been better to have an updated consultation response. I'll make sure that's received and uploaded to the publicly available documents.
I'm going to suggest that that's just a documentation update. It won't. It oughtn't to delay the actual decision. So I think, but it's just a case of let's make sure the documentation shows the full facts. Anybody else with any questions before we let Julian sit down? That's true, actually. Yes, he is in fact sitting down. Well, I'm thinking of getting him to sit down further back. So if we haven't any further questions, I'm going to suggest he does that. Thank you, Julian. Do we have any questions for Liz? And as I say, I hate to keep repeating myself, but I think in some ways, some of that last statement may have muddied the issue. We aren't talking about the application. We aren't talking about the decision, the original decision. We are talking about the moving of the building. And I think we all understood that, didn't we? So, any questions on why this building used to be there and is now going to be here? No? Any debate? How do we feel about the recommendation? Shall I put it to you? So, the recommendation is, I feel like there should be a drum roll. The recommendation is that the Chief Planning Officer be authorised to grant permission for the development, subject to those items set out in section 16 of this report, and specifically a deed of variation to the section 106 obligation agreement for permission, and B, conditions as amended below if the freehold owner shall fail to complete by deed the relevant variations to the agreement. If this were to happen, the Chief Planning Officer would be authorised, shall be authorised, to refuse permission following the expiration of a 6-month period from the date of Planning Committee. So basically that's just putting in a fallback in case something goes wrong with the deed of change. So that is the recommendation. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Lydiard and a seconder. Councillor Cherry? Great. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? So, thank you, Shri Councillor Carley. Where do we stand? 3-3. So we go to penalties. No, in fact, actually, we go to casting vote. Penalties would have been interesting. We go to the casting vote, so therefore I am voting in favour of the permission being granted. Nothing personal. So that means the recommendation has been carried. Permission is granted for that variation. Thank you very much. And with that, that being our last item, I would like to close the meeting, and it is now 9 o'clock. Thank you. Thanks for your hard work this evening. Appreciate it.